They did it! The young animators have finally proven that they can make animated classics just like the ones during Walt's time. At this point in our story, beginning with The Little Mermaid, many fans have often referred to this period as the start of the Disney Renaissance, a time when the next generation of animators and business leaders after the Nine Old Men and the Disneys were in charge of creating the next batch of timeless animated masterpieces that would be highly beloved for many years to come. In fact, they were even able to earn some significant milestones that not even Walt was able to accomplish, especially with Beauty and the Beast, where it was the first ever animated feature to be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, and that was just one of the movie's many achievements. However, for the team at Disney, their moment of glory was just the beginning, as many of the developing projects at the time would later join the same league as The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, starting with Aladdin. It's the tale of a young thief with a heart of gold named Aladdin, who meets a beautiful girl he falls in love with that turns out to be the Princess Jasmine. When he later entered the Cave of Wonders, he discovers a lamp that contains a genie that could grant him 3 wishes, which he used one to try to reunite with Jasmine by disguising himself as a prince. However, with the Grand Vizier Jafar secretly plotting to take over the land of Agrabah, Aladdin will have to be very careful what to wish for next if he wants to save both Agrabah and his relationship with the princess. The project all began in the mind of Howard Ashman back in 1988. When working on The Little Mermaid, he made a 40-page treatment, with the help of Alan Menken, of an animated adaptation of Aladdin that would stay true to the original 1001 Nights Tale, but would also be a 1930s-style musical with a genie based on Cab Calloway. However, the company was not a fan of this idea and sent them off to go to work on Beauty and the Beast. But even if Disney didn't like the idea, some of the crew at the studio certainly did, including Linda Wolverton, who made her own version by mixing Ashman's version with the movie The Thief of Baghdad, where elements of that feature ultimately found its way into the Disney project, including an evil Grand Vizier named Jafar, a sultan that likes to play with toys, and a character named Abu. The movie wouldn't officially get started at Disney until directors John Musker and Ron Clements joined in Wolverton's draft and pitched it to Disney as one of their potential movies they could do next, which was selected to get the green light. And so, the directing duo wrote down their own draft of Linda's version, and with the animation team, they developed a story reel to present to Jeffrey Katzenberg on April 1991. However, for the team at Disney, that day would be known as Black Friday, the darkest moment in the production's history when Katzenberg stated that not only did he completely dislike the story reel, but told them to redo the entire plot without delaying its 1992 release date. That means with the limited amount of time they only had 8 days to create a new story for the feature. With the help of writing duo Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, the directors and the crew worked tirelessly to make those 8 days count, and had made a lot of changes and sacrifices along the way, including following Jeffrey's orders to step back from Ashman's version, taking out Aladdin's mother, changing the character of Iago from a pompous British aristocrat to a comedic loudmouth with the voice of Gilbert Gottfried, and making Jasmine more rebellious than previous Disney princesses. And after those rigorous 8 days of developing a whole new story for the movie, Jeffrey finally accepted the draft, and the film can now bring its characters to life with animation. One of the first animators that came on board was actually a newcomer to the Disney studios, but already established himself as a master of his craft. Beforehand, he worked for Richard Williams at his studio in London, where he sharpened his skills by animating commercials and movies like Raggedy Ann and Andy: A Musical Adventure and The Thief and the Cobbler. That man was Eric Goldberg, and he was assigned as the supervising animator of the Genie. As one of the first artists in the project, he suggested that the style should be reminiscent to the works of his longtime hero, legendary caricaturist Al Hirschfeld, which the team found to be a good idea since Hirschfeld's flowing lines fit in with the Arabian style. Of course, since it was his idea, Goldberg took the most inspiration from Hirschfeld when animating the Genie, especially when he always impersonates a wide variety of celebrities. When designing the characters, it's usual that they always come with their own set of challenges. However, in Aladdin, there are a few that their obstacles were a lot more unique when crafting them. One of them was the magic carpet, who is literally just a living rectangle that can only communicate through pantomime. While that did set a challenge for animator Randy Cartwright, the real task with the carpet was to make him a hybrid of 2D animation and CGI. The hand-drawn elements was used to actually animate the character, while the computers were brought in to put an elaborate design on top of the carpet and use texture mapping for it to follow the carpet's movements. Another one that had its own set of problems was Aladdin himself. Originally, they wanted to avoid making him look like the typical hero prince, since animators often find that they are the most boring characters to animate. So to change things up, they decided to depict him as a young teenager, like a reckless 13-year-old that only his mom can talk sense to him and first discovers love. However, Jeffrey Katzenberg did not like the kid approach of Al, since he didn't believe that a scrawny boy like him would end up winning the heart of the beautiful princess. In his Hollywood mind, it would only make sense if Jasmine falls for a fit and attractive young adult-looking stud.
I found the character of Jasmine kind of blows him away. I don't understand why she goes with him. I understand why he goes with her. That's easy. She's wonderful.
While there were some arguments between Jeffrey and the directors and animators on his design, they settled for something that's right in the middle of what they want. A handsome man who's also believable to be the young underdog, which he then was animated by Glenn Keane and his team. But the characters were not the only challenges the animators had to face when developing the visuals. Along with the magic carpet, the use of computers and caps were used to implement more CGI, like the entrance to the Cave of Wonders, and to carefully select the colors to highlight the mood of the scene and personality of the characters. Considering that this all came from Howard Ashman's idea and had a moment where he put his heart into the project, this obviously gave the songs a big obstacle to face: the fact that Ashman passed away in 1991. When creating his treatment, he also made several musical numbers with Alan Menken. However, when Howard died and Disney had to make all those changes to the story, many of the original songs had to be taken out, and only 3 of Ashman's songs survived in the film, including Arabian Nights, Friend Like Me, and Prince Ali. But Disney wouldn't let Alan work alone for the rest of the production. They had to find a lyricist with the same stage musical reputation that can perfectly fit Ashman's shoes, and they did with Tim Rice, who previously worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber on several of his musicals. When Rice joined Aladdin, while not all of his contributions ended up in the feature, the songs that he added with Menken that made it in the film are One Jump Ahead, the reprise of Prince Ali, and A Whole New World. But among all the people that were involved with the movie, there is one name that people first associate with the film. Not only because he was the feature's biggest star, but he was also the actor from the film that got the worst treatment from Disney. So with that said, let's talk about the voice of the Genie, Robin Williams. While Katzenberg was thinking of having comedians like Steve Martin or Eddie Murphy to play the part, Ron Clements and John Musker always had Williams in mind. In fact, to pitch the role for him, Eric Goldberg animated the Genie performing a skit from one of Robin's comedy albums.
But first, before we do the play, I'd like to talk about the very serious subject of schizophrenia. No, he doesn't. Shut up! Let him talk!
Since he was impressed with the pitch and was grateful after working on Good Morning Vietnam, he agreed to play the part and recorded his lines while he was filming Hook and Toys, while giving Disney a huge amount of material to work with thanks to the heavy amount of ad-libbing. However, when Robin signed on, he made an agreement with the company. Williams was so grateful to join the cast that instead of asking for his price of $8 million, he only asked Disney to pay him the Screen Actors Guild scale pay of $75,000. But in exchange, he asked that the marketing should not use either his image or name, and that the genie can only take up to 25% of any artwork used to promote the film, just so it doesn't interfere with Toys, which was scheduled to be released about a month after Aladdin. Despite the agreement, Disney broke their side of the deal and even went as far as going through loopholes to still heavily promote the fact that the film features Robin Williams and have the genie be the star of most of the commercials for tie-in products.
Fine, I understand. After all, you've lied to everyone else. Hey, I was beginning to feel left out.
For Williams, this was a serious betrayal and became very vocal about how the company screwed him over. They tried to buy their way to make amends with him by sending a painting by Picasso that was worth over $1 million, but that form of bribery did not work on Robin. It wouldn't be until a few years later when Joe Roth took Katzenberg's place as the chairman of Walt Disney Studios and gave a public apology to Robin Williams. For Robin, that was what he wanted to hear, and not only did he accept the apology, but he also did so by reprising his role for one of the direct-to-video sequels, Aladdin and the King of Thieves. After a massive marketing campaign, the film finally came out on November 25th, 1992, and Disney's wish for its success was granted. Critics were giving it great praise for its lovable songs, beautiful animation, memorable characters, and especially the humor. In fact, one of the renowned Looney Tunes directors, Chuck Jones, called it the funniest feature Disney ever made. And at the box office, not even the Cave of Wonders contained the amount of riches that the movie made, being the first animated feature to earn more than $200 million domestically with $217 million, and the highest grossing film of 1992 with a worldwide total of $504 million. But during the middle of all the celebrations, Al just couldn't help but get himself into trouble, especially with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. The committee accused the film of a few instances of discrimination, including the portrayal of the characters, where Aladdin and Jasmine are shown as beautiful and anglicized, while Jafar and the others in the kingdom are presented with thick accents and a grotesque and mean caricature, and pointing out how one of the lyrics of Arabian Nights is deemed racist. So much so that even Disney had to change it for all future releases.
Where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. Where it's flat and immense and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home.
Other controversies this movie faced include when Aladdin was at Jasmine's balcony and people mistakenly thought he said, "Good teenagers, take off your clothes," and having a heated debate in the animation community whether if the Disney movie was a ripoff of Richard Williams' The Thief and the Cobbler, discussing about the many uncanny similarities like with the characters, the art style, the story, and more. Because of all this, Aladdin has often been found on several lists among the most controversial films of all time. But even with its controversies, nothing can stop the film from getting itself a place among the Disney classics and grab some awards along the way, including 2 Annie Awards for Best Animated Feature and for Eric Goldberg's animation, and 2 Golden Globes for Best Original Score and a special award for Robin Williams, along with 3 Oscar nominations for Best Song for Friend Like Me, Best Sound, and Best Sound Editing. But the real award magnet from Aladdin was the song A Whole New World, especially the version sung by Peabo Bryson and Regina Belle, where it won an additional Golden Globe, an Oscar, and 3 Grammys, including Song of the Year, making it, as of 2020, the only Disney song to win that award. Following afterwards, Aladdin would turn into another prominent franchise for Disney, where outside of its huge market of toys and games, the film spun off a series in 1994 that ran for 3 seasons with 86 episodes, and the first direct-to-video Disney sequel and the first direct-to-video animated film in that same year, The Return of Jafar, which also served as the pilot for the series. While not as liked as the first by critics, it became one of the best-selling VHSs of all time and launched a new business for Disney in the direct-to-home media market. Oh, and as I've mentioned before, in 1996, a second direct-to-video sequel was released called Aladdin and the King of Thieves that featured the return of Robin Williams as the Genie. In 2011, the film spun off into a stage musical that also appeared in Broadway in 2014, where it got some decently positive reviews and a great success by grossing hundreds of millions of dollars at the New Amsterdam Theater alone, and got a Tony for James Monroe Inglehart's performance as the Genie. In 2019, Aladdin got another adaptation, but this time as a live-action remake, and while the reviews were average at best while getting praise for the performance of Will Smith and Naomi Scott, it made about twice as much as the original at the box office with over $1 billion. While it was no easy task to turn this movie into a reality and can often get as much trouble as a street rat, it still managed to pull through to deliver magic that is familiar with the Disney traditions that the world knows and loves, and that is new with its unforgettable cast of characters and an inspiring new twist on the visuals to make Disney animation feel fresh and new. But regardless if it's either the characters, the songs, or its animation, the film is marketed as a highlight in Disney's history for making many generations love, laugh, and get engaged with one of their most thrilling and funniest animated films that brought audiences to a whole new world.
Made you look.
After finishing Aladdin, the crew at Disney were having a party to celebrate another completed project. However, the party served another purpose for the animators, not just for their past achievement, but also to plan for their future. At that time, they had a choice between two movies to work on as their next big feature. The one that was getting the most attention was Pocahontas, since it seemed a lot more appealing by looking more serious, mature, awe-inspiring, and had the potential to be Disney's next Best Picture contender. The other one that was less interesting was just another talking animals movie, often referred to there as Bambi in Africa. While the project was having a hard time gathering animators, some did come on board either because they really wanted to animate animals, or they just wanted their chance to have their first supervising animator job. It may not seem like much at the time, but it was the team the film needed to create what people know today as The Lion King. It's the story of Simba, a lion cub who's the son of the king of the Pride Lands, Mufasa, and is learning how to be the next ruler. However, his uncle Scar, fueled by jealousy, successfully executed his plot to kill Mufasa and get rid of Simba so that he can immediately claim the throne. While out of the Pride Lands, Simba spent most of his time growing up with his new pals Timon and Pumbaa, where they show him how to live an easy life with no worries or responsibilities. But that wouldn't last long though, as Simba inevitably gets a wake-up call to take back his rightful place in the circle of life. The idea originated from a chat with the heads of Disney Animation, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Roy E. Disney, and Peter Schneider, just brainstorming potential ideas for a movie, and Jeffrey immediately liked one where it was set in Africa. From there, Katzenberg developed plans for a story where it would almost be interpreted as his own biography, where it would be a coming-of-age story that features the death of a family member and the struggles during his time in politics. When it was time for Disney to work on it, writers like Thomas Disch and Linda Wolverton worked on their own drafts for the movie that was first titled King of the Jungle, where it was originally a lot darker and grittier, where it focused on an ongoing battle between the lions and the baboons, whom the latter were meant to be the villains. And if you're curious about what it meant for Rafiki, well, he was originally planned to be a cheetah. By 1991, Oliver and Company Helmer, George Scribner, and Beauty and the Beast's head of story Roger Allers were brought in as directors, with Brenda Chapman as the film's head of story, all leading the charge to turn those written words into a proper narrative for the movie. Their first job in their position right after Beauty and the Beast was to go on a trip to Hell's Gate National Park in Kenya with several other members of the crew to get a true feeling of the natural African environment, and they gained a new mission for the film to emulate that feeling that they had in Kenya onto the picture. However, while it seemed like everything was in place, it turned out to not be as functional as planned, especially with the directors. While usually good friends, Scribner and Allers would often get into heated debates about what the tone of the film should be. George wanted a serious take that would be more like a nature documentary, while Roger wanted something more fun and keep the same tone they've been going on with their past films. But Allers ended up getting the upper hand in this case, as the producers wanted to follow the tradition of their recent films by making this a musical. This was the last straw for Scribner, as it was clear Disney wanted to go further away from his vision. Ultimately, George ended up getting let go and was later replaced by Rob Minkoff. When Don Hahn stepped in to be the producer, he noticed the story still had some issues and asked the team for one more big rewrite so that it could actually have a central theme to focus on, which is the coming-of-age aspect where Simba has to learn to leave childhood and accept the responsibilities he has to take in life. The writers also took some inspiration from other stories, including the lives of Bible figures like Moses and Joseph, and the William Shakespeare play Hamlet. Also, they decided to change the title from King of the Jungle to The Lion King because, well, if you look at the Pride Lands, I wouldn't really call that a jungle. When casting for some of the more comedic roles, Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella, who were together in the 1992 Broadway revival of Guys and Dolls, auditioned out for the role of the hyenas to take advantage of their chemistry. While they gave the directors a real good laugh, they realized that there were two other comic reliefs that would be a better fit for the duo, and that's when they hired Nathan and Ernie to play as Timon and Pumbaa respectively. Speaking of the hyenas, it was originally planned to be a reunion of Cheech and Chong. While Cheech Marin came on board as Bonsai, Tommy Chung, however, wasn't available. So the only way to go around this was to turn the hyena duo into a trio by adding a dumber one who only laughs called Ed, played by Jim Cummings, and the other was turned into a female that acts like the head of the group named Shenzi, played by Whoopi Goldberg. As the movie was often referred to early on as Bambi in Africa, then it would only make sense that they study like if this was Bambi. Not only did the animators go to zoos to study the creatures, but the studio also invited wildlife expert Jim Fowler to bring in lions and other animals of the savannah so that the artists could get a full grasp of their movements and their mannerisms. As it probably had been disheartening early on when most of the Disney crew would rather want to animate on Pocahontas than on Lion King, at least they did receive some additional help outside of the team the film could gather. There was the group in Orlando, Florida that helped animate almost 20 minutes of the picture, including the I Just Can't Wait to Be King number, and computers to help create the hundreds of cel-shaded wildebeest for the Stampede sequence. Early on, Tim Rice signed on to be in charge of the music, but while Alan Menken was more busy finishing up Aladdin and moving on to Pocahontas, Tim needed a collaborator to make the songs, and he knew exactly who he wanted. ABBA! But they were too busy working on an opera, so they got his plan B, Elton John. At first, the crew thought that the movie was going in a weird territory. I mean, this is a talking animals movie where a lion cub gets framed for murder with songs by Elton John. On paper, that just sounds ridiculous. In fact, the addition of Elton John was what really set off George Scribner to be divided with the crew. But as Rice and John were taking care of the musical numbers, Hans Zimmer was hired to work on the score, and he invited his friend, South African composer Lebo M, to help implement the African traditions to the music. As the movie was getting close to completion, Disney was faced with some unusual obstacles that the team had to work around, like an earthquake that caused the animators to finish their work at home. But there was one that was more unexpected, and even tragic to the point that it would forever change the atmosphere of the company. On Easter 1994, Disney president Frank Wells died in a helicopter crash at the age of 62. While everyone was heartbroken at the loss, Jeffrey Katzenberg also saw this as an opportunity. He always wanted to be Michael Eisner's second-in-command and have Wells' position. The only problem was that Eisner was always hesitant about the idea. But now that Frank was out of the picture, Jeffrey was ready to do whatever it took to get that president position. And when going on press tours talking about the movie, not only was he promoting the picture, but he was also promoting himself to have the press portray him as if he was the next Walt Disney. Now, his relationship with Eisner and Roy E. Disney was already sour at that point, but his promotional stunts with The Lion King were the final straw for them.
What were you thinking out there, Jeffrey? I don't understand why you have to push everybody against the wall to get that president job when Frank didn't even die that long ago. Don't you even care that he's gone? You know, I could have made you president if you waited a little longer. But now the last person I want to give this position is to an egotistical, stressful, and greedy individual like you. Now don't ever ask me for the job again, and get back to work.
When Michael made it clear that he would never get the job, even if he was promised to in the past, Jeffrey knew that he had no future at Disney, and not long after The Lion King's release, he resigned and sued the company for money he was owed at the time.
You haven't seen the last of me! You'll pay for this! You'll all pay!
But back onto the movie, the entire crew was really impressed with themselves with what they did with the film's opening, that on November of 1993, when only a third of the movie was finished, Disney released the entire Circle of Life number as the film's trailer, which did succeed in building up audiences' anticipation for the feature. And while the pressure was big at the studio and the marketing campaign was even bigger, the film finally came out in theaters and really emphasized the king in The Lion King. During its release on June 24th, 1994, the film received massive acclaim from both critics and audiences and easily became the biggest movie of the year. In fact, the numbers at the box office make that statement true, making an astonishing $312.9 million domestically and earning $768.6 million worldwide. Later on, the film would also get a couple of re-releases, one in IMAX in 2002 that included the deleted song The Morning Report, and another presenting the film in 3D in 2011. Growing its earnings to $422.8 million domestically and $968.5 million worldwide, not only making it the highest-grossing film of 1994, but also, as of 2020, the highest-grossing hand-drawn animated film of all time. However, just like Aladdin, Simba was often found getting himself in trouble. They were mostly minor, like when the flower spelt the abbreviation of special effects and people mistakenly thought the F was an E. But there is one controversy that is still discussed to this day relating to another cartoon lion.
You must avenge my death, Simba.
Ever since the film was released, many have accused the film of being a complete ripoff of the 1960s Osamu Tezuka anime series, Kimba the White Lion. Despite the strong amount of similarities between Kimba and The Lion King, the directors state that they were unfamiliar with the show when making the film. But some of the animators were aware of what it was, but said that even with that knowledge, they weren't going out of their way to steal elements from the series, and whatever parallels were found are just coincidences. Even the voice of adult Simba, Matthew Broderick, thought that this was an American adaptation of Kimba when he signed on. But among Japan's animation community, they were furious at the Disney film. So much so that 488 cartoonists and animators in the country signed a petition to make Disney at least acknowledge that Kimba must have had some influence onto The Lion King. But even if people to this day are still strongly adamant on their position in the argument, no real action had taken place in response to the controversy from either Disney or the owners of Kimba, Tezuka Production. Besides, the latter wasn't in the mood to sue because Disney's lawyers are more intimidating than a pack of lions. But no matter how similar it seems to be to Kimba, the controversy doesn't even put a dent onto the King's cultural impact. During award season, the movie earned a significant amount of wins and nominations, including 3 Annies for Best Story, Best Voice Acting for Jeremy Irons' performance as Scar, and Best Animated Feature with 3 extra nominations, 3 Golden Globes for Best Score, Best Song for Can You Feel the Love Tonight, and Best Picture in the Comedy or Musical category, along with an extra Best Song nomination for The Circle of Life, 3 Grammys, and 2 Oscars for Best Score and Best Song for, again, Can You Feel the Love Tonight, including 2 more Best Song nominations for The Circle of Life and Hakuna Matata. Later on, the movie was commonly found on many lists of the best animated features, and even for the best movies in general, like Empire's Greatest Films Ever Made and Time's 25 all-time best animated films. It even got in a couple of lists by the American Film Institute, like at number 99 on their top 100 best songs and movies with Hakuna Matata, and at number 4 on their top 10 animated films. And in 2016, the film was selected to be in preservation in the National Film Registry. Following its initial run in theaters, The Lion King would go on to be one of the biggest entertainment franchises in history, in which the wide variety of media, especially with all the merchandising that has its name on it, made a combining total profit that has exceeded the 11-digit mark. The feature had 2 direct-to-video follow-ups, including a sequel called The Lion King 2: Simba's Pride, and a mid-quel spin-off called The Lion King 1.5 that focused on Timon and Pumbaa throughout the events of the first film. On television, 2 shows were developed from the film, like 1995's Timon and Pumbaa, which aired for 3 seasons with 85 episodes, and 2015's The Lion Guard, which aired on Disney Junior with 3 seasons with 74 episodes, along with 3 TV movies. At the parks, the movie has a very prominent presence, but their highlighted moments were special shows like the Festival of the Lion King, a live show with performers, puppets, and visual effects all presenting the songs of the movie. In 2019, Disney released a photorealistic computer-animated remake with an all-star cast with James Earl Jones reprising his role as Mufasa and Jon Favreau as the director. While critics and audiences were not as thrilled with this version, especially when many criticized it for being a shot-to-shot copy of the original, it was a true box office king, making about $1.66 billion, meaning that it is not only the second highest grossing film of 2019 under Avengers Endgame, but also, as of 2020, the highest grossing animated feature of all time. But if there is one piece of media that can be called the crown jewel of The Lion King, even more than the animated film that started it all, then it has to be the stage musical. Directed by Julie Taymor and made its debut in 1997, this special retelling of the film with elaborate costumes and creative puppets would go on to become one of Broadway's most legendary musicals, winning 6 Tony Awards, including Best Musical among all the other awards it got, and as of 2020 is the 3rd longest running show on Broadway and the highest grossing stage production in history. In fact, most of the franchise's earnings come from the stage musical alone. As the film's story is about how a lion cub grew to become a mighty king, The Lion King itself also went through the same coming-of-age story. At first, many had their doubts if it was even going to be successful in the first place, passing it off as Disney's B-movie while others were working on something that had more potential. But as the sun rose on the feature's time, no one would ever expect that it would become one of Disney's biggest cultural phenomenons, earning billions of dollars and even dominating the stage as much as it did for the screen. It is one of the very few movies in history that can present the power of animation and storytelling at this level to both amaze and inspire millions all around the world, where generations to come will still remember the beloved characters, singing the timeless songs, and learn how we are all connected in the great circle of life. As the Lion King crew surprised everyone by turning a doubtful concept into one of the most renowned movies of all time, the other team was working hard on a project that could possibly top the achievements of their past films, even The Lion King. In fact, they believed that if Beauty and the Beast was a Best Picture nominee at the Oscars, then this would be a Best Picture winner. And that was Pocahontas. Set in the early 17th century, to be precise, English settlers of the Virginia Company have set foot in the New World, hoping to find gold. One of these settlers, John Smith, wanders off to explore the land, and then encounters the free-spirited daughter of the chief of the Powhatan tribe, Pocahontas, who shows John that the people the English refers to as Injuns or savages are more spiritual and down-to-earth than they think. As the two start to grow fond of each other to the point of falling in love, their bond sparks a war between the English settlers and the Powhatan tribe, and it's up to Pocahontas to stop the feud between the two groups and bring peace before any blood would be shed. Going all the way back to the Gong Show pitch meeting by Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, one of the directors of The Rescuers Down Under, Mike Gabriel, proposed an idea using only a poster and a short description of a love story where the girl has to pick between respecting her father's wishes and to love one of the English settlers that her dad considers an enemy. In that conceptual poster depicted a forest where a bunch of woodland creatures were looking so excited at whatever was on the right, as Tiger Lily from Peter Pan stood in the middle with the words Walt Disney's Pocahontas right above her. Considering that Peter Schneider was interested in making an animated film with a Romeo and Juliet style story, the pitch turned out to be a hit and was immediately accepted on the spot. As this is Disney's first animated feature based on a historical figure, they coincidentally started off by choosing a very complicated one. When it comes to Mataoka, who was given the nickname Pocahontas, which some say means little mischief or playful one, historians to this day can never fully seem to agree about what are the stories about her that are considered a myth and which ones are historical facts. That, and the elements that are agreed to be true, show that Pocahontas had a very harsh and violent life. Not to mention that she met John Smith when she was just 12, and Gaston is a more accurate depiction of who John was in real life. So because of most of the historical accuracies being remained in question, and the confirmed facts are too gruesome for a family film, the team at Disney felt like they were left with no choice but to take a lot of creative liberties to both dramatize and romanticize the story, including boosting up Pocahontas' age to a young woman and turn John Smith into an Errol Flynn-style hero. Another real-life figure that they had to modify for the picture was Governor John Radcliffe, who was actually a combination of several early 17th century English captains. But even with all the creative liberties they could use, they were still careful to present the Powhatan and early American culture accurately, consulting with numerous of historians and native experts, visits to historical sites at Jamestown, Virginia, and always working with consultants to help authenticate the life of a pre-colonial Powhatan tribe. Even some of the people among the cast and crew also helped out with the historical aspects of the film, like story supervisor Tom Cito and the voice of Chief Powhatan, Russell Means. After he was done with Aladdin, Eric Goldberg signed on to co-direct with Gabriel, since the Lion King crew was full. He was surprised that the movie was going for a much more serious tone than the previous film he worked on, but he was determined to be a part of the crew for the commentary on race, especially when the subject was pretty big at the time because of the Los Angeles riots. However, while this is one of Disney's more serious animated features, that didn't mean Goldberg wouldn't fully feel at home working on it, since some comedy would be supplied by Disney's own brand of comedic animal sidekicks. Originally, Pocahontas was supposed to have 3 animals by her side, all thought up by Joe Grant. They were Meeko, Flit, and the main comedic star of the picture, Red Feather, a cocky talking turkey who thinks he's a real ladies' man. And yes, I said it correctly that he was supposed to talk. More specifically, have the voice of John Candy in interacting with Percy, originally voiced by Richard E. Grant.
Wow! I mean, that was close.
I take it you're some sort of bird.
That's the understatement of the year.
Egad, it speaks.
Please don't let me stand in your way. Last thing I want to do.
I'd love to continue this scintillating conversation, but really I have to run.
However, later in production, the crew agreed that it was best for the animals to be mute to have more realism, and with the addition of John Candy's passing in 1994, the turkey had to go, and Meeko took the position of supplying the film's comedy. Speaking of voices, the process to find someone to play as Pocahontas was a little more reverse than how it's usually done. They started by hiring Broadway singer and actress Judy Kuhn as the lead singing voice, and then Disney went to look for a Native American actress who sounded like her, which they found with Irene Bedard while she was filming Lakota Woman Siege at Wounded Knee. Also, Richard White, the voice of Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, was supposed to play as Radcliffe. But since the team was worried that he might end up sounding too much like Gaston, the role was given to the voice of Cogsworth, David Ogden Stiers, who simultaneously voiced both Radcliffe and his assistant, Wiggins. Ever since the beginning of development, Jeffrey Katzenberg had one goal in mind for the movie: to turn this into a Best Picture winner. To achieve what Beauty and the Beast couldn't do, but almost did. And by time, his enthusiasm spread throughout the studio to the point that everyone believed that Pocahontas was going to be their next masterpiece, while The Lion King was going to be the little appetizer before the main course.
I'm telling you guys, Pocahontas is a home run. It's basically West Side Story with American Indians. No, it's Romeo and Juliet with American Indians. It's a hit! It's a hit, I tell you! It has hit written all over it! Lion King, on the other hand, I want to say it's kind of an experiment. I mean, we don't really know if anybody truly wants to see it.
Hate to say it, but don't count your eggs before they hatch, Jeffrey. Also, are we even ready to represent Native Americans again in our animated films? I mean, the last time we've done it, things didn't—
Hey! That was a different time! Besides, there's no need to worry. I'm positive that this film will be our next Beauty and the Beast. Only this time, we will win that Oscar! I can see it now. No! I can feel it now. Oh yeah. Oh, baby, you're feeling fine. Oh, come here, you! It's all about the Benjamins, baby.
Should we stop this?
Nah, let him have his moment just a little bit. Okay, that's our cue. Let's get out of here.
Oh yeah, you like that, Lincoln?
When it was time for the animators to go to work, the directors made Michael Giammo as the art director after making some concept paintings for the film. Even when keeping the Native American themes, Giammo took inspiration outside of Jamestown for the art style, like folk art of Mexico, Africa, and the Caribbean. He also looked at past Disney artists to get inspired, like Ivan Earle, Richard Kelsey, and Mary Blair. One notable animator that was involved with the picture was someone who hadn't worked at the company for around 14 years. Beforehand, he was one of the handful of Disney animators who quit during the making of The Fox and the Hound to become one of the most prominent artists working for Don Bluth. And that was John Pomeroy, who returned as the supervising animator of John Smith. When assigned as the supervising animator of the title character, Glen Keane's first mission was to update her look to fit with what Disney was going for with the movie. The closest thing to an accurate depiction of the real Pocahontas was a portrait done back in 1620. But let's be honest, that is not a face that looks like it can win the heart of the heroically handsome John Smith. So, following Katzenberg's demands to make her an idealized, attractive woman, Keane took inspiration from several models and Irene Bedard herself. But his main inspiration for Pocahontas' look was when he met two Powhatan-descended sisters, Shirley Little Dove and Devi White Dove Costello McGowan, where he stated that he first saw Pocahontas' face when he looked at the two together. Going back to Aladdin, one fact I have yet to mention was the collaboration between Alan Menken and Tim Rice after the passing of Howard Ashman. Okay, yes, I mentioned that they worked together, but I have yet to say how they worked together. The answer? Not really well. Not that there was any bad blood or anything, but it was hard for Menken to always hop from New York to London or wherever Rice would be so that the two could actually be together to work on the songs. That tough experience was why Tim and Alan had to work on separate films afterwards, where Rice worked on The Lion King with Elton John and Menken worked on Pocahontas. But again, the composer needed a collaborator to work on the lyrics. So not only Disney got another acclaimed lyricist with great experience in musical theater, but also someone who lived close to Alan in New York to save him from the travel troubles. Enter Stephen Schwartz, who already made music for some stage musicals and got nominated for several Tony Awards for them, like Godspell and Pippin. Throughout the production, Schwartz proved to be a suitable successor to Ashman, and he shared his close collaboration with the team throughout the production, like working a lot with the writers and collected tapes of Native American music and Old English sea shanties for inspiration. The first song they worked on was Colors of the Wind, which began as lyrics inspired by a letter to the US Congress by Chief Seattle during the mid-19th century. When the directors got to hear the song, they immediately knew that this would set the heart and soul of the feature. However, as it's often the case, not all their work ended up in the final film. One prominent example was If I Never Knew You, which was meant to be the movie's big love ballad between Pocahontas and John Smith when she reunited with John when he was held prisoner by her tribe on the night before his execution. Because the kids got bored with it quickly during a test screening, the songwriting duo and the team at Disney all agreed that the song had to go, even if the animation was pretty much finished. But it wasn't fully taken off of the film though, as the pop version by Shanice and John Cicada can still be heard during the credits. The movie finally had its release on June 16th, 1995, scheduled at the exact same time as Pocahontas' 400th birthday, and already had a lot of build-up behind it. A huge marketing campaign, taking the Colors of the Wind number and use that as its trailer to recreate the same effect as The Lion King, and having the largest movie premiere in history 6 days before its release at Central Park in New York City, with over 100,000 people who attended. And after all the build-up and anticipation to be Disney's Best Picture movie, the film was ultimately a hit. And a failure. Technically, yes, the movie was a success at the box office by earning $141.5 million domestically and $346.1 million worldwide. But compared to what Disney's previous animated features achieved, Pocahontas was not able to follow on their footsteps, especially with the critics. They enjoyed a lot of the elements like the animation, the songs, and the voice acting, but many agreed that it was the writing that made this a lot weaker compared to what Disney released before. Not to mention that the cultural and historical accuracies became a subject of controversy, where some indigenous leaders and experts state that Disney got it all wrong and their portrayal of Native Americans in the film was more hurtful than actually informative. With that said, it's no surprise that the movie never even got a nomination for Best Picture. But it still did receive some awards, including 4 Annies, and the song Colors of the Wind won a Grammy, a Golden Globe, and an Oscar, and got an additional Oscar for Best Score in a musical or comedy. 3 years later, the film received a direct-to-video sequel called Pocahontas 2: Journey to a New World, where many deemed that while it may not be, well, good, some say that it's slightly more historically accurate than the first.
Rue this day you wait and see. What is to be or not to be?
Hey, I only said slightly more than the first. I never said that it was. Since then, Pocahontas became the first member of the Disney princesses to be a woman of color who was the lead in her own film. But it was clear that the movie's impact never made it to the same levels as the films that came before her. At the time when Pocahontas was their new movie, the environment at Disney completely changed that would later have some long-term consequences. With the sudden passing of Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg quit on bad terms, this left Michael Eisner to be in charge of the company alone and bitter from the loss of a friend and the betrayal of another. And with Pocahontas being their first sign that they might have already peaked, they'll have to make the most with what they have left to make their renaissance worthwhile.
is the monster and who is the man?